So today we are replacing the power steering pump on this Ford Transit van. This is a 2.4 litre diesel, and first thing you need to do is remove the belt. So you just get a little 3/8 ratchet down here in the automatic tensioner, just in there, and then you just pull the tensioner back and then you just slip the belt off. I just tuck the belt underneath the power steering pump and I leave it on the rest of the pulleys, and then you don't have to remove it completely. Next thing I'm going to do is remove this hose going to the reservoir. Just give it a wiggle. And you need to make sure you've got something underneath to catch all the fluid that will come flying out of there. So next thing to do is undo this union, which is a 17. One thing I didn't do is you should probably unbolt it from that bracket that bolts onto the pump at the back, because it stops the hose from coming up so easily. I didn't realise that actually. I just thought it was just tight all the way out, so I just persisted. But you'd be better off removing that rear bolt first, which you'll see in a minute. So those other bolts that hold the pump onto the head, they are all 10s. This is one of them. So you can see that bolt was tighter than it would usually be because the bracket is putting pressure on it, because I've pulled up the feed pipe for the pump. Now on some power steering pumps, these bolts snap off. So if you look on eBay or something, you'll often see that these bolts are for sale as well. So if you are waiting for the pump anyway, for a couple of quid, you might consider just getting the bolts just in case. There's nothing worse than being stuck off the road for a stupid reason like not having the right bolt. Undo the front bolt. This one here is usually the one that gives the most grief, and in my case, my one was quite rusty, but they all did come out, which was good. So just remove this. It's on there with some Jubilee clamps, which are on mine are 8mm. Just slacken them off a little bit and pull the inlet out of the way. Strictly speaking, I don't think you need to remove that, but it does make access easier, that's for sure. You could also plug that open air inlet hole now, if you wanted to. So these are the two 10s underneath that hold the pump on, and then that's it. Once these two are undone, the pump will come away. You can see how badly my pump was leaking. It was leaking power steering fluid out of the front. So you can see I've left this front bolt in place. I just threaded that back in a couple of turns so as the pump was coming away it wouldn't just fall off. I like to leave the easiest bolt to get to until last. Now your pump might need a couple of taps because there are some dowels that it can get stuck on. But again, in my case, the pump just wanted to be free. It came straight off. And there we have it, she's out. So I was going to try and rebuild my pump, because I often rebuild these rather than replace them because it's much cheaper. However, I just couldn't get the pulley off of this one. It was just stuck on there so badly. And even with there's a special puller tool that you can use. Even with using that, it just broke the pulley. and with the cost of a new pulley and the seal kit, I just decided to get a new pump. So I'm going to coat these up with a little bit of copper grease, preventing them from getting stuck if it fails. Never put too much trust in your brand new parts, because they can often be junk. Just going to remove this so I can get that bolt started. So just locate the dowels. And then get that in there. And it's quite simple from there. Once they're snug down, you just go around and get all the other bolts started. Now here, I am making a mistake. This is something I do all the time actually. I fit things back in the wrong order. That bolt should go through the bracket. So what I actually did was I fitted all the bolts and then I torqued them all down, and then I realised that the bracket was in the wrong place, so I had to remove this one again. Same again for these bottom two bolts. So just try and tighten these up to be hand tight for now. These bottom ones are definitely the trickiest ones to get to. But actually, access for all of these is pretty easy. If you didn't have a ratchet, you probably could just do these parts with a spanner and you would be fine. So that is it for those 4 bolts. Once we've got them most of the way in, snug those down and then we'll finish them off with the torque wrench. So I had the torque spec for 21 Newton meters. So usually bolts on stuff like this I find are not as tight as you think, but in this case they were actually tighter than I thought they'd be, which is probably why they're prone to snapping off. You just get a feel for it sometimes when you're tightening something down, whether it feels too tight, but they all worked fine. They all took the torque just fine, and nothing snapped, which was a major bonus. Now, just before I put anything back on, just a good idea to try and clean up some of the rubbish that's fallen onto the alternator. So now we'll just clip back in the reservoir and connect up that little lower hose. You want to try and locate this exactly where you removed it from. So if there's a witness mark on the hose itself, try and line that up perfectly. Now this is where the penny drops. I realised. Yeah, there's a little bit of a dance to getting this one in. Kind of need to tighten this down first and then put that rear 10mm in. You definitely want to make sure you start this dead straight. You do not want to cross thread that. That would be an awful day. There's a little 19mm nut, if memory serves me correctly. You can see the holes becoming better lined up as I put this nut in. And then we'll tighten that down again for the last time. There's nothing worse than putting something together and then realising you have to take it back off again. Well, actually there is something worse, when the parts are brand new and broken, but we're hoping that's not the case. And now we'll get back in there with the torque wrench and just make sure it's torqued up. think most people wouldn't bother to torque this down. They would just tighten it by what they feel is tight enough, and off they go. And I think most people wouldn't really have a problem with that. I think they'd be fine. I think the real danger is actually over tightening these things. You definitely don't want to strip out the casting. And now that everything's connected back up, we just want to fill it up. So you just want to make sure that you're putting in the right fluid. Don't just buy generic power steering fluid. Make sure you get the stuff that has the right additives as specified by Ford. I just fill it right up to the top. Just way overfill it. I generally find that you end up needing to top it up anyway once it's been run. I just like to spin it over a few times and just make sure it's got a little bit of fluid in it before I start the van. Now I'm just going to refit this air intake pipe. And this is just held in there with 2 8mm Jubilee clips. Jubilee clamps rather. This Jubilee clip down the bottom is a little harder to get to. You want to make sure when you put it back that you can get to the clamp easily. Now it's just a case of slipping back on the belt, so you pull the tensioner up. And then you just slip the belt over the pulley. You can just put in a little 3/8 ratchet into here, but it's better if you've got a little 3/8 socket, because on mine the little detent ball always gets stuck in it, and it's a bit of a faff trying to pull the thing out. So that's that done. Now you just want to start it, and then you just want to turn the wheel lock to lock a number of times. And what this does, you can do it with the car up in the air. It pulls all of the fluid through the pump. You can also do it with it on the ground. I didn't bother jacking up for this, I just did it while it was on the ground. But just while having a look, everything here looks fine. No nasty noises, no nasty surprises or anything. So you see the fluid there is like fully topped up at the moment. And then we'll go and turn it lock to lock, and that'll pull some of that fluid through the pump. Fill up all the power steering lines, and all the air will bleed out. It'll probably feel a little notchy when you're doing this, like some parts will be super light and then other parts will feel like a little bit jarred. But that'll all smooth out. So that's that. I cut this clip here, but you can continue doing that. And that's essentially all there is to replacing the power steering pump in your van. So if you have any tips or tricks, or if you ran into any problems that I didn't cover in this video, then please leave a comment. Maybe you'll be able to help somebody out. And all I would say is the bolts that hold the power steering pump on often snap, so be careful.